Let's start. There we go. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. We are really excited this February, too, because all month long, we have dedicated to celebrating amazing women in science around the world. By month's end, we will have had over 40 hangouts with incredible women coast to coast across the globe. It's been an incredible month, and so thank you guys for being a part of that, our biggest festival we've ever done. Right now, we're joined by 5 classes from across North America, so I want to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out. We've got Miss Sinclair's grade 2s in Kalispell, Montana. Hi, guys. Hi. We've got Miss Smith's grade 5s in Burlington, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hi. We've got Mr. Kozaczynski's grade 2s in Canton, Michigan. You're in my book. Punching above their weight with excess enthusiasm. We've got Miss Reset's group, grade 5, Arnprior, Ontario, pouring in. Hi, guys. Wow, people love reptiles and amphibians, Rachel. And then Miss Holden's grade 3s in Spruce Grove, Alberta, at negative 30 Celsius. Awesome. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live from the Vancouver Aquarium, part of OceanWise's national effort across Canada. So they have been doing hangouts with us on all manner of really neat topics and creatures at the aquarium lately. But today they're going to do something a little different, and they're going to share information about the reptiles and amphibians at the aquarium and about the differences between those two. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rachel. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks, Jesse. Good morning, everybody. As you said, my name is Rachel. I'm here at the Vancouver Aquarium. We're located on the western side of Canada, right in the heart of Stanley Park in Vancouver. So we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples. And just like all of you listening to your locations, we have reptiles here, both on land and in the water in my own backyard. So I can bet if you were to go out and go really exploring or look it up online, you will definitely find that you have some amazing reptiles around where you live too. OceanWise is an international ocean conservation organization, and we work to try and preserve ocean life as well as talk about how amazing it is, because we are all connected to water. And even though some of these animals have amazing adaptations to survive in some of the most extreme climates, they are still a part of that water cycle that we all have to rely on in order to survive. So better understanding how these animals function, how they work, how to identify them is going to help us make sure that they're safe and able to fulfill the roles they have to do in the ecosystem. So I am going to teach you the special characteristics that we look at to identify reptiles and also amphibians, because these two groups sometimes get a little bit confused with each other. And then I have a challenge for you at the end. I've got a game. We'll see how well we can practice identifying reptiles and amphibians. So I'm going to share my screen because I do have some photos. And then you're going to see Jesse's face for just a second there. Excellent. And so the reason I've got this picture of a desert is because reptiles as a group of animals are specifically adapted to be living in some of the most extreme climates, including one that has almost no water. The special characteristics that they have are what enable them to diverge and go out into these incredible habitats, unlike amphibians. It's one of the biggest difference between the two groups. So when we're looking at a reptile, we're looking for predominantly their skin is usually the first thing we go to. So you're looking for something like scales or a shell or thick leathery skin. This is one of the most identifying characteristics. So I've got a video here of a reptile. Maybe you can try and guess which reptile it is. We've got that wonderful leathery skin, thick scales, and it provides protection for them. This is what enables them to go out into deserts and survive, because they have ability to protect themselves from drying out. And so that scales are fantastic protection for both away from predators as well as the environment itself. Now, if you're trying to form some guesses as to what animal this is, it's not a crocodile and it's not an alligator. It's actually a cousin of these animals called a caiman. We've got 2 caimans here. They're very adorable animals, a little bit smaller than the crocodile and caiman, but just as powerful and if not dangerous too. Making some more observations, because they are a reptile, we see that we've got the scales, which is great. Another thing that we have to look for to determine if it's a reptile is if they're vertebrae and if they breathe air. So just like humans, we've got bones. You can feel them at the back of your neck, in your arms. Is what's helped keeps our structure. And reptiles are very similar. They have bones as well. We call them vertebrates. So they have to have this feature in order to be a reptile. And they have to be air breathers. So whether they live on land or if they live in the water, because some reptiles are fully aquatic, they do have to breathe air. So looking at my caiman, I can see that he's got a good solid body structure, which I can guess he's probably a vertebrate. And I can also see the nostrils, and he's on land. So I'm going to guess that it is an air breather as well. So far, we're doing great for reptiles. Now, the other cool thing about most reptiles is actually where their bodies are, or their legs are compared to their body. Now, if you look at your body, your legs are directly underneath the weight of your body. So this helps us be bipedal. This helps us stand on 2 feet, and so that we can maneuver around our environment. But reptiles, most of them, when they do have limbs, are actually splayed out to the side of their body. So if you were actually to raise up your elbows and kind of look like a puppet, that's where their arms are going to be. Or if you were to stand in a squat, that's where their legs would be. So we tend to see reptiles with their scales, with their bones, with their air breathing abilities. We also tend to see reptiles with legs that are out to the side, very much unlike humans where we've got our legs directly underneath us. Now, that is not the case for all reptiles, but with a lot of them, it helps them to maneuver through. I've got a video here of our caimans eating their weekly meal. They do get a chicken once a week, which is all they need as reptiles, because reptiles are also cold-blooded. So that means that they are unable to regulate their own body temperature. That can be a big challenge in the environment. When you get too hot as a person, as a human being, we start to sweat. And when we sweat, that is our body helping to cool us down. At the same time as we get too cold, we're able to shiver, and that's our body trying to make energy. Reptiles are unable to do that. They don't have the ability to sweat or to shiver, and so they rely on the environment in order to keep them warm. This is an emerald tree boa. It's one of my favorite reptiles just because I think the color is incredible and amazing. And so these animals have to use the environment around them in order to make sure that they're staying at a healthy temperature, which is why we see reptiles bathing out in the sun or maybe hanging out in the water, because they have to use that environment in order to make sure they stay the right temperature. If they get too hot or too cold, just like humans, they can get very, very sick. So with reptiles, when we're looking at a reptile, we're looking at that wonderful scaly skin. They've got to be vertebrates. They have to be lung breathers. And they're also cold-blooded, meaning they cannot regulate their own body temperature. Now, I mentioned that there is another group of animals, of course, that do get confused sometimes for reptiles, and that are amphibians. Amphibians evolved around the same time as reptiles, and so they do share a lot of similarities, which is sometimes why they can be confused, particularly with their lives in the water. All amphibians, just by looking at my amphibian here, this is an Oregon spotted frog, Oregon spotted frog. This frog has really slimy skin, so there's no scales to protect it from the environment. And this is the most defining characteristic of an amphibian. They have to be in water. Their eggs always have to be laid in water. We start off as tadpoles because they start off with those wonderful little tails, eventually growing up into the adult frogs. So amphibians have to be near water. They do not have the scales that are going to protect them. And so when we get to turtles, turtles are usually the one that confuses people the most. Turtles live in water, but they still have that wonderful leathery skin to protect themselves. So they are a reptile, not an amphibian. Amphibians are limited most often to living in areas like this, where there's lots of swamp, and they're very dependent on the water in their life cycle. They have to be born in water. Most of their lives have to be spent in water, with a few exceptions. So amphibians are much different, where they have not had that adaptation to help them diversify out to different habitats, unlike reptiles. That scaly skin really makes a big difference to determine where you're able to live, and the environment they live in has a big impact on how they survive. So we see a lot of, this is one of the habitats that we go out. Now at OceanWise, we are part of a restoration program with frogs so that we are breeding them and hoping to release them back into the wild. British Columbia has some of the most endangered species of frogs. The Oregon spotted frog and the northern leopard frog are both very endangered in BC. So we're a part of a breeding program to help release them back into the wild. And we're looking at for amphibians.
Rachel, you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry, guys. Give it 2 seconds. We'll see if we can get her back online perfectly. All right. Let me send Rachel a quick message. Make sure she knows she's a little off. But yeah, sometimes we bring hangouts from all over the world. This is what happens. Keeps it exciting. Let me just check with her. Give me 2 seconds, guys.
How do I?
Oh.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, are we okay?
That's it. Yeah, you're okay now. I can hear you now. You just cut out for a minute there. You were on the beautiful habitat. You just talked about some frogs that were endangered, and then you cut out entirely.
Oh, so sorry. I'm not sure what happened there.
That's okay. There you go.
We're in a building of cement and water. It's bound to happen. So here I got on the screen. Are you able to see the two lists?
Yes, reptiles and amphibians.
Perfect. So that's just a quick summary of that difference. Sometimes for myself, I like to see the difference kind of side by side. So it helps me remember we've got the biggest difference, of course, being the scaly skin. It's the #1 thing to look at. But if you were to find a bunch of eggs, for example, that's also a good way to identify reptiles versus amphibians, because the amphibian eggs have to be in water. The reptile eggs have what we call the amniotic egg. It comes with a shell. So that big difference, again, helps protect the eggs and allow them to be laid on land. So protection is a really big difference between these two animals. And now that we've looked at briefly the way you identify them, I've got a bit of a challenge for everyone to see if they can practice to identify reptile or amphibian. So I'm going to show you a picture. I'm going to give you 15 to 20 seconds to discuss with your neighbor if you think it's a reptile or an amphibian. I will count you back in and I will give you the answer and we'll see what happens. So here's our first wonderful creature. This is actually an incredibly endangered species. It comes from Panama. So I'd like you to discuss with your friend for a couple seconds. Do you think it's a reptile or do you think it is an amphibian?
Dun, 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 dun.
Should have the Jeopardy music. That'd be great.
Good. We can get the classes to do a show of hands if we'd like when we're done.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to. I got rid of the stop sharing thing. So, well, we've got our amphibian there. I'm just gonna go back. How do you stop sharing here? It doesn't want me to stop sharing.
Keep sharing. Don't worry. I can.
There we go. This is fun. I love technology.
Okay.
All right, so there's our amphibian. I just gave it away. So that was, hopefully you had a good guess with that. It was an amphibian. They're called the Panamanian golden frogs. Like I said, they're incredibly endangered. They actually don't exist in the wild anymore because of habitat destruction. What we believe they were completely eliminated from the wild. But there are some populations in aquariums and zoos that are breeding them in hopes that they'll be able to be released again back into the wild, us included. So we do have a couple breeding pairs here. So I'm going to pick a little bit of a harder one, and we'll see what happens with that. This one, here we go. Actually, let's do this one. Okay, we're ready for it. This one might be easy. It is on land, I can tell you that. So it could be either one. Both of them could be on land when they're adults. There we go. All right, here's the next one. We'll give you a couple more seconds, and I'd like to know if you think it's a reptile or it's an amphibian with your friends. Discuss. All right. Sometimes in the wild, you only have a couple seconds to look, so I'm going to count you back in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, our friend has disappeared. Let's get a show of hands from everybody. If you think, with a hand up, do you think that was an amphibian?
Okay, let's see.
All right, a couple of hands up.
Yeah.
All right.
So
we know it's a vertebrate. We know it's air breathing. It's on land. That's a good start. Hands up if you think it's a reptile. Wow, most people. That is excellent. All right, both very good guesses. It is a reptile. That is an animal called a basilisk. It's a type of little lizard. And it's a bit tricky when they get to be that tiny, but we're getting that biggest difference being the skin. When they've got nice scaly skin, it makes it a little bit easier to identify what it is. And then I've got one more animal that I think is probably one of the strangest animals that you can find out in the wild. It's originally from Mexico, and I can tell you it's underwater. Doesn't necessarily tell you what it is, but it is underwater. And so this is our next animal. Very cool animal. I'll give you 20 seconds, discuss with your friend. Do you think it's a reptile or an amphibian?
Freaky. That's what it is.
They are also incredibly endangered because it is a food source for many cultures. So that can be a big challenge too if we're not careful about how much we're eating. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so this wonderful animal is living underwater. It is a insectivore, so it likes to eat, like here it's eating a couple mealworms. Very quick and it's good to go. And we see how it's underwater with the way the rocks are moving. So I'd like to know if you think it is a reptile or an amphibian. All right, show of hands, let's see. Do you think it is an amphibian? Oh, lots of hands up. Okay, interesting. All right, hands down. Do you think it is a reptile? Put your hand up. A couple, just a few, all right. And I can see why, because it does have the body posture that looks very similar to lizards. It is, however, an amphibian. That animal is called an oxalotl, which again, one of the coolest names that I've heard of in nature. And it is related to newts and salamanders. They live their lives completely underwater. And as I said, they are also very endangered. A lot of amphibians and reptiles are endangered for a number of different reasons. Predominantly habitat destruction is a big one, but also just fresh water. So amphibians in particular, they rely on fresh water in order to survive. And so because many of these freshwater bodies are close to humans, our lives very closely intersect with these animals, and we have an impact on that fresh water. So I encourage you, boys and girls, to go out and look around your own environment and see what kind of water you find and what animals might be living there, because we are directly related to all of these habitats and we have an impact on how they survive. Particularly in Ontario, there's some very cool frogs. There's actually a frog called the wood frog that is able to freeze itself over winter. So there are many cool things where you live, and just by going out and exploring, we can have a better understanding of the kind of things that we find. So those are some reptiles and amphibians and how they survive. The environment has a huge impact on whether they're able to survive and the kind of cool traits that they have. So I would like to know if you have any questions about reptiles, amphibians, survival, all the cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And yeah, so we're going to dive right into questions. I want to go back really briefly to one of the things you showed. The first amphibian you showed was the Panamanian golden frog. And it's really worth noting that this is a creature that we knew was going to go extinct in the wild, and then zoos and aquariums around the world collected all the remaining of them on Earth and kept them and are trying to rebreed them so that we can eventually release them into the wild, which is one of the great conservation stories on Earth. So I just wanted to highlight that. But yeah, with that said, let's go to Miss Sinclair's class first. Take it away, guys.
Do you know anything about the Komodo Dragon? Because I'm studying it. I have one.
Sorry, the Komodo dragon was what I heard.
Yeah, do you know anything about it? Can you tell us about it? Because he's studying that right now.
Oh, okay, gotcha. The Komodo dragon is a very, very cool animal. I also studied it a little bit in university. What's really neat about them is their saliva is actually toxic. So when they bite onto like a bison or a deer or something that they're hunting, they can then just leave the animal alone and wait for those toxins to start infecting the animal. So they actually are venomous with their toxin, which is pretty cool. And I thought that was really neat about Komodo dragons.
Can you tell us how big they are too, just for classes that might not know?
Oh, Komodo dragons are very appropriately named. I believe they're about 2.5 meters with the tail and everything included. So they can kind of be as long as a small car, which is crazy.
Very cool. Awesome. Let's go to Miss Smith's class. You guys have a question?
Yeah. Is there any pythons that have venom?
Are there any venomous pythons? Yes, I believe there is. I don't know of a species off the top of my head, but it depends on the species, because I like that some of them aren't, some of them are, but it really depends on a lot of where they live and the kind of teeth that they have too, which is cool. So there are some, but unfortunately I can't name any specifically off the top of my head.
Yeah. If you want to, for class, if you want to see a really cool skull, look up python skulls, because the way the teeth go, it's backwards like this. It's really, really neat. One of the coolest skulls in the animal kingdom. All right, Mr. Kozaczynski's class. You guys have a question?
Yes. How do baby reptiles get out of their eggshell?
Ooh, how do the reptiles get out of their eggshells? That's a very good thinking, because they have the shell, they got to break out. Oftentimes they're born with a type of toe that they'll actually use to like crack it open. And really it's just them trying to batter at the eggshell until they can get out. So the tricky part, some of them are born with like a toenail and it's a way to actually kind of dig themselves out of the shell. And others, they just have to keep hitting it until it breaks.
Cool. Before we go to our fourth question, I want to go back to another one of the creatures you showcased. So you showcased a Basilisk Lizard. Now there's something very, very cool about them that you didn't share that I think is really neat for classes to know. It's like something they can do maybe when they're running.
Are you're referring to the running one?
Yes!
I have seen one of those. It's quite cool. So I can show the picture again of the Basilisk. This is a different species of Basilisk that I'm showing. This one's only about like a couple, like the size of your hand, but there is a type of basilisk that very similar body shape, much bigger. It's actually kind of the size of a small stuffy, and it has a really cool ability that when it starts to pick up speed, it's able to actually run on its two hind legs, and they have been observed running fast enough to actually skip over top of water, which is pretty cool. So sometimes there is a type of lizard that is able to actually run across the top of water, which is pretty neat. So they come in a huge variety of abilities and shapes and sizes and colors and, yeah, special traits.
Awesome. I will send a video of that to classes too. I love reptiles and amphibians, so this is a lot of fun for me. All right, Ms. Russett's class, if you guys have a question, come on up.
What's the most dangerous reptile?
Ooh, most dangerous reptile. Yeah, I guess it depends on what you define as dangerous. So there are the ones that are definitely the most venomous, and then there's ones that come with a very dangerous reputation. The green anaconda, for example, is the largest reptile, or largest snake. It can be up to 18 feet long as a female, which is huge. And they often come with bad reputations. I know the king cobra comes with a bad reputation, as well as like man-eating snakes. There is really no such thing as a man-eating animal. We are not the natural prey for any animal, but with king cobras, for example, king cobras eat rat snakes eat rats, and rats are most often found in homes and people's houses. So the more that we expand where we live, the more we start kind of coming in contact with a lot of these dangerous animals. So anything with a mouth can bite, and unfortunately many of these are venomous. So I know that even though something might have a bad reputation as being dangerous, it's really important to dive a little deeper and find out why people find them dangerous, and maybe it's preventable as well.
Excellent. All right. Before we go to Ms. Holden's group, we have Ms. Daniel's class. So grade 4s in Rogers, Arkansas join us. And the first question from them is there any reptiles that do not lay eggs?
No. I can't think of any.
Oh, I can, if I may. So boa constrictors actually have anacondas and boas have live babies, and then pythons lay eggs. It's really interesting that they're very, very similar, but they're on different continents. Boas have live birth in South America. Pythons lay eggs in Africa and Asia. So that's an example. But most...
That is so cool. I actually didn't do that, to be honest. That's really neat.
Awesome. Great question. And then Ms. Holden's group, you guys have a question.
How long can an alligator stay underwater for without breathing?
Great question.
Great question. Quite a long time. They can go several hours without moving, particularly because they rely on their environment to control their body temperature. If they're really, that might slow down their heart rate as well. So they can hold their breath for quite a while. And sometimes with our caimans as well, when they're on land, they will just sit there not moving I've seen them not move for 2 to 3 hours. if not most of the day. So that's quite crazy. They can go quite a while without holding their breath.
One of those don't try this at home things. You cannot hold your breath for 2 hours underwater, so don't try. But yeah, they're amazing.
Exactly.
Awesome. Guys, we're ripping through these. So let's go back to Miss Sinclair's class for a second question. Come on up.
How long wait, do you know how much golden frogs are still alive?
Ooh.
So I don't know the specific number. There are quite a few organizations that are rearing them. So I'm trying to remember, it's ARC program, which is the amphibian and reptile conservancy program is the one that helps organize the restoration efforts with the frogs. So I don't know the specific number, but I know that there's none in the wild currently because we are all holding on to them in organizations so that once we get really good at breeding them, we can then release them back into the wild. So it's a very small population right now because they're all in human care at the moment.
Great question. All right, Miss Smith's class. Second question from you guys.
What's the lifespan of an ocelot?
Ooh.
Oh, that's a really cool question. Our oldest one is 13. I've got a friend here who's, thank you, Mike. That's awesome. One of our aquarists is looking after the fish, so our oldest one is 13.
That's funny.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Peanut Gallery. We appreciate that. Cool. Mr. K's class, if you guys have a question, come on up.
What is the continent that has the most reptiles on it?
Ooh. I don't know. Mike?
No.
What continent has the most reptiles on it? Okay, if he doesn't know, I don't feel so bad. I would have to guess. There are a lot in warm areas. So you're going to be looking at places like South America, for example, Africa, Asia are going to be where most of the populations are. I don't know which continent is the one that has the record for it, unfortunately. But you're looking mostly predominantly at like warmer climates for sure.
Good question. Hard question to answer, but yeah, great answer. All right, Miss Russett's class.
She's coming.
Take your time, no hurry.
What's your favorite reptile? And can you show us a picture of it?
Actually, okay, so luckily enough, I can actually move my computer, so I will show you my favorite reptile. I apologize, this might make a bit of noise, but I'm gonna wheel you for a moment, and you can kind of see a bit of the aquarium. Stay.
We're on tech cart. I like it.
Yes, we're on a cart. So, where are you? Oh, of course you're in the back. I'll move the computer in a second, but my favorite reptile is a turtle called the pig-nosed turtle. And I think they're very cute because they've got this little snorkel face so that they're able to breathe the water without being spotted by predators. I'm just waiting to see if you will. Okay, we're going to move you for a second, guys.
Let's see. Oh, there he is. Awesome.
There he is. Excellent. Very, very cool. I think they're adorable, and I also like that it looks like he's flying when he's swimming. Cool.
Cool. Thank you so much. Awesome. Let's, yeah, a question again from Miss Daniel's class, just coming in right now. What reptile lives the longest? Might be a hard question to answer, but.
Yes. Record for the age, but they can be decades old, like 40, 50, 60 years. Crocodiles, alligators, and many snakes can live up to be very long. So if you take
some like Galapagos tortoises and things. So we had Lonesome George, which was found in Darwin's time, so over 150 years old for some certain tortoises.
There you go.
Very cool. All right, Miss Holden's class. We are doing so well, guys. I love it.
Does reptiles change color?
Do reptiles change colors? They can change colors a little bit. So that's what's really neat is they've got that. A lot of them have camouflage already on their scales. So they've got the really dark, very speckled patterns. And that helps them blend in when you've got an environment like this that can be very complex with the light and the shadows. Chameleons can change their color. So that's the first one that comes to mind,
Yeah.
which is quite cool.
One thing that's really neat with chameleons for the classes too is that they don't actually change their color to blend in. They change their color based on their attitude. So if a chameleon gets angry, they'll change color and get bigger and get darker reds and blacks. And if they want to be calmer or like, you know, woo a mate, they'll get lighter colors. It's really, really interesting. So just do check that out if you can. And then, yeah, we got lots of time for a whole other round of questions. So let's go to Miss Sinclair's class again.
Do you guys have green sea turtles?
We actually do have a green sea turtle. Yeah, we have a green sea turtle named Skuna. And Skuna was actually found up in northern British Columbia, which is very, very bad for a green sea turtle. Normally they're found in Mexico and Florida and all these tropical places. But a fisherman spotted her up near Haida Gwaii, which is quite north in British Columbia. And so our Marine Mammal Rescue Department went out and they rescued her, rehabilitated her. The government decided that she was non-releasable because she had suffered so much damage and had been so sick when she got rescued in the first place that she would not be able to survive if she went back in the wild. So then we offered her a home here, and she's been here for quite a few years. She's a big diva, personally, I think. But we do have a green sea turtle.
Awesome. All right, Miss Smith's class. You guys have a question?
Yeah, is there any predator for like the big scaly animals like crocodiles and alligators?
Yeah.
Do they have any predators?
Very thoughtful question because they are so big and scary. Yes, even the top predators of any food chain have predators themselves. Often from each other is a big one. So for example, like they might fight and that can be a big threat, or bigger crocodiles might prey on smaller crocodiles. They will definitely prey on the babies of those other crocodiles as well. So that's a big challenge, is even the biggest predators start off really small at some point. And when they're small, they're very vulnerable to the bigger animals that would eat them. So other reptiles can be a threat. Snakes eat other snakes. And then humans are the other biggest predator because we're with habitat destruction and hunting and things like that. Especially when you think of how we can use their skin for clothing, that could also be a threat for those animals too.
I just wanted to chime in with two other things too. So when they get to be adult size, things like big crocodiles or big caimans, very hard to eat. Anacondas will eat caimans. So anacondas will eat like 10-foot long crocodilians in South America. And then in Africa, Nile crocodiles, one of the biggest crocodiles on earth, are deathly afraid of hippos. Hippos will completely do in a crocodile. They're much scarier. They're much more powerful. So that's just really kind of neat. A lot of people think hippos are very calm and nice. They're not. All right. Mr. K's class. If you guys have a third question.
Why are reptiles cold-blooded?
Ooh, very clever question. Why are reptiles cold-blooded? I like that question. We are not entirely sure. We think it's just how they evolved. So reptiles are animals that originally their ancestors, so their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers came up from living in the water. And many fish are also cold-blooded because they don't have to worry about weather as much when you're in the water. It tends to be consistent if you don't travel. So we think that as these animals change from living from water onto land, that characteristic carried over. And so their ancestors were cold-blooded and it just hasn't changed over time.
Okay, great question. Detailed question too. I love, we've had some great questions today, guys. So for all your classes, thanks for the enthusiasm and all the great questions. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, these are great, really thoughtful questions. I like it.
Yeah. Miss Russett's class. Come on, guys.
She's coming. Yeah, it's coming.
I love the bed on the ground. That looks really comfortable.
It does, doesn't it? We should do that next time.
Is there any reptiles or amphibians in the ocean?
Yes, lots of reptiles in the ocean. Amphibians tend to only live in fresh water because the salt the water can move through their sorry, my stutter. The water can move through their skin, so salt would mess that up and make them sick. Reptiles, there's tons of reptiles in the ocean. Turtles are a really good example of that predominantly, and we do get some water snakes as well.
And worth noting too for the water snakes that they are very venomous. In most cases, water snakes are some of the most venomous snakes on earth. They don't go after people. They don't bite people, but they have one of the most toxic venoms known in the entire animal kingdom, which is super cool.
How do you were a reptile enthusiast?
I wanted to be Steve Irwin when I grew up, so this is like a lot of fun for me. I wanted to be a herpetologist studying snakes. All right, question from Miss Daniel's class, which is, what's your favorite animal to study? So we've already shown us the pig-nosed turtle. That might be it. But if there's something different, by all means.
I haven't had the chance to work in a lab myself. So if I were to pick an animal, I find the mud skipper fish really interesting because it's a really good example of how evolution is still happening. So change is never a still thing. It's always going on. It just, in nature, takes a couple 100 years for us to notice a difference. With mud skippers, it's a fish that lives in the warm tropical freshwater. And freshwater, when it's hot, doesn't tend to hold a lot of oxygen. And so these fish, we've started to see them actually living now on land. They've adapted to be a land fish, essentially. They still have to stay moist, and they still have to go back to the water, particularly to find food. But this is a really good example of how change is still happening in nature. And I think that would be a really interesting place to study, to see kind of why that change is happening, and also if we're changing the environment too much for them to keep up with. I think that's another really good question to ask.
Yeah, great answer. All right, again, we have tons of time, so let's do one more round of questions, and then we'll wrap up after that. We'll start again with Miss Holden's class first. Miss Holden's class first, and then did I just do my brain? Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good.
Come on
It's
up.
a Monday.
Yeah.
What frog is extinct and why did it go extinct?
Which frog is extinct? That's a cool question. So actually, I have to think about that one for a second.
There's a lot.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I don't know of any off the top of my head. I know there's a tree frog that recently went extinct. The name escapes me. It sounds like rabbit, but it's the Rab's tree frog is one that I've heard of recently. That's what it's called. The Rab's tree frog is one. The reason they go extinct, there's a couple different reasons why it could happen. Biggest one we're seeing is habitat destruction. So again, humans expanding where we live and not really taking into consideration those that already live there in the first place. So a lot of the ponds that amphibians need to survive and the freshwater sources that they have might be either taken away because of human development, or they might be then polluted because humans live so close and we're not paying attention to what we're doing with the environment. So that's one of the biggest threats, is habitat destruction. And then also just when toxins get into the water system and whatnot, that can be very damaging for frogs as well. But habitat destruction is a big, big one. And it just means we need to be paying attention and making the animals a priority. And then we can work with them to make sure that everybody gets something that they need.
Before we go to our next question, I just want to chime in with in South America. So we brought over invasive species is an issue we cover a lot with our conservation-themed hangouts. And one of the big problems is bringing in species that don't belong in one place from another place. So we did this with a frog that came from West Africa, and it had a type of fungus on it that didn't really affect it. But in South America, the frogs have no immunity to it, and so frogs all across South America are going extinct or becoming very, very endangered because of this fungus. So frogs are actually one of the most endangered groups in the entire world. They're something that we're contributing a lot of conservation efforts for, because they're really susceptible to being attacked by this fungus. So it's good to see that people are concerned about them, and things like taking Panamanian golden frogs out of the wild and into the aquarium are ways that we can help protect those species going forward. So just wanted to add that. Miss Sinclair's class, sorry for prompting you so early last time, but come on up.
What's the lifespan of a crocodile?
What is the worst kind of crocodile?
There's no bad crocodiles, they're all good.
Well, actually, what do you mean by the worst?
What's the lifespan of a crocodile?
Oh, lifespan.
Okay. That's a really good question. So crocodiles can be living up till 70 years, like 70 to 100 years in that range. Again, if they're safe and they are able to meet their survival needs, they can be very, very old.
That's a great question. All right, let's go to Miss Smith's class.
How can you tell that a reptile or an amphibian is a girl or a boy?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's hard to tell just by looking at them on the outside. With snakes in particular, like the green anaconda, for example, the females are always larger than the males, and that's common for a lot of snake species. And quite a number of reptiles, the females tend to be larger. So if you find one and it's massive, you can totally take a guess that it's a girl. But oftentimes we have to wait to see how the reproduction happens. So if they're laying eggs, if they're building the nest, we look for those kind of behaviors. Or if the males are trying to fight over a female, that might be a good indicator as well. It's very hard because those scales particularly make it difficult for us to identify any kind of like one feature.
Great question. All right, Mr. K's class, come on up.
I learned that amphibians only have one bone in their neck.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is a really interesting part about amphibians.
Very cool. Also, that class sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I was saying they can't turn their head. It's a very good point.
Yeah. That class is a mic with a stand. That's amazing. Well done, guys. Tech class of the week. Awesome. All right. Actually, so one of the neat things when you look at amphibian evolution from fish to amphibians when they came out of the water is you look at how many bones are in their neck. So that is a really, really good point, and we can tell how things are changing over time with those sort of fossils by neck bones. All right. Miss Russett's class, come on up.
What do you think the biggest change that you've seen in reptiles and amphibians?
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful question. Unfortunately, the biggest change that I've noticed in my career so far is that they are declining. So we're seeing more and more of these species be threatened, and not enough people are talking about them. So there's so many of these species that are, I mean, personally, I think they're really cool because they have these amazing survival abilities, but they don't always get as much attention as, say, really cute animals like pandas and things like that. So that, unfortunately, is the biggest change I've noticed, is a lot of them are declining. The cool thing is that people are starting to kind of talk about it and pay more attention to the environment, which is awesome. But we need people like you to go out and keep talking about it and sharing the cool facts and get other people to know that reptiles and frogs matter and are really important for the environment, and they're in trouble.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the reasons it's really nice to have a reptile amphibian hangout is that people don't think about them as much. They're not as cute and cuddly as mammals. They're not as, colorful as birds necessarily. So thank you guys for being a part of this. It's great. All right, completely non-reptile related question from Miss Daniel's class, which is how many fish are in the tank behind you? And I think that was when you were at the other tank. So how many animals do you have in the aquarium, Rachel?
Yeah, we have around 750 different species of animals. Majority of those are fish. That equates to around 45,000 individuals, and we count all the different like snails and clams as best we can. So we really care about every single animal, whether it's a sea star or it's a sea otter. They all really matter. The ones that are, these are rainbow fish, which are quite cool. They're very neat. They tend to cluster together quite a lot. And then the other habitat has there's definitely over 10 different species, and you've got a range from massive prehistoric fish called Narapaima, some relatives of the piranha called the tambaki. We've also got some smaller like catfish and stingrays. These are all the freshwater tropical animals that I'm standing in front of.
Super cool. All right, we'll wrap up with one last question by Miss Holden's class. If you guys have one, go right ahead.
I'm actually going to jump in and take over here. You had mentioned the northern leopard, or the leopard frogs and the wood frogs.
Yeah.
And you had said that they are almost extinct in British Columbia?
Yes, the Oregon spotted frog and the northern leopard frog are critically endangered in BC.
Because we live very close to a conservation area where they're very common, but I didn't realize, so that's something special for our kids to know then, is that we have a lot of them in the Wagner Bog area very close to us.
That's really neat. So that might be a neat investigation for further study, boys and girls, is to actually go look at why there's the difference between our regions.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Ms. Holden. All right. So, Rachel, before we wrap up, is there any last message you want to share with classes about reptiles, amphibians, how people can find them in their own backyard, for instance, anything like that?
Well, firstly, it's amazing to be curious. Keep being curious. Go out and explore your environment. Find books. Read a little bit more, because you're asking all the right questions, whether you're someone who wants to go to a lab, whether you want to be a wildlife photographer, maybe you want to be a politician and make change about the environment. These are all really fantastic questions to be thinking about. What is the next step? I now know what a reptile looks like. What do I do with that information? So please keep being curious and going out to explore the world around you. If you do find a reptile or amphibian in the wild, keep a safe distance, be respectful of their home. Do not approach, but admire from afar and appreciate how these animals have been able to survive for millions of years. They're so cool.
Outstanding. So as you guys know, boys and girls, if you guys could join me in getting ready, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone, and if you could join me in saying a huge thank you to Rachel for joining us today. Everyone is demuted, so go right ahead. Sorry, that's hilarious. Thanks, guys, for your enthusiasm. Over the top enthusiasm. That was great. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so neat to have reptiles and amphibians highlighted so prominently, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I look forward to hopefully seeing all of you in the future.
All right. Have a nice rest.